Welcome back to another Housing 2.0 Thought Leader webinar. It's perfect timing for this webinar too, because we are nearing the end of National Construction Appreciation Week. I hope you're feeling appreciated. Today we're going to discuss climate change responsive design. After what we've seen in Hawaii, Vermont, Massachusetts, I have a feeling that this topic is top of mind to quite a few people out there. It's really crucial to design our homes and buildings to respond to that change and stand up to the threat that it brings. That's why our guest is going to explore the importance of critical pre-design project programming through a variety of techniques. Joining us today here is Peter Pfeiffer. He is an internationally recognized architect, interior designer, and building scientist, professionally licensed in Texas, New York, New Jersey, and Oregon, as well as with the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. He focuses on environmentally sensitive design and net zero solutions. Peter is a lead accredited professional who has spent 30+ years designing and developing pragmatic, high-performance green buildings and homes. Now, in 2004, he was named a fellow of the AIA for his lifelong achievements in mainstreaming green building. Peter has been listed as one of the 10 most influential residential architects of the decade, and he was awarded the prestigious Sustainability Superhero of the Year award by none other than Green Builder Media. Now, we do have sponsors for this webinar who also need to feel appreciated, and they are Mitsubishi Electric. Mitsubishi Electric promotes sustainable building through the electrification of residential and commercial heating and cooling products. Their mission is to advance technologies that reduce waste output, promote sustainable resource cycles, while increasing energy efficiency and eliminating dependence on fossil fuels. Next, we have Sunnova. They are a leading national residential solar and energy storage provider with a specialized team dedicated to the home building industry. Their experience in the new home sector means they understand the complexities of home building and offer customized solutions to help you build homes that home buyers want, all while staying on schedule. With over 50 home builder partners across the country, Sunnova was founded to deliver customers a better energy service at a better price. Through their solar and solar plus energy storage service offerings, they are disrupting the traditional energy landscape and the way the 21st century customer generates and consumes electricity. Now, we also have Schneider Electric, who is driving the digital transformation of modern homes with smart and sustainable energy solutions for ultimate comfort and energy efficiency. Their connected home ecosystem of smart energy management solutions provides digital control of energy use throughout a home, from the grid via their smart electrical panel to their connected wiring devices. This grid-to-plug solution makes it significantly easier to create smart solar power and backup power-ready homes, both now and in the future. Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions is helping builders across the country differentiate themselves with powerful, code-compliant, and cost-effective indoor air quality solutions that provide a safer environment for home buyers. Jinko Solar is a leading PV module manufacturer and energy storage system integrator. The company has deployed more than 100 gigawatts of their Eagle modules in 160 countries globally, including more than 17 gigawatts right here in the United States. Eagle Storage brings together the best energy storage technology for turnkey hardware and energy storage services. Eagle is a trusted choice for U.S. solar and storage projects. And we also want to appreciate LP Building Solutions. LP Building Solutions is committed to building a better world by empowering builders to choose resilient, sustainable, and efficient building materials to construct the structures families and individuals live, work, and play in every day. Through a diverse portfolio of resilient structural solutions and beautiful, durable siding products, all made with 100% sustainably sourced wood fiber, LP is able to help provide real solutions that address many environmental issues builders and homeowners face today. For LP, building a better world means manufacturing environmentally responsible solutions so we can all build better together. Now, during the course of today's presentation, you can submit questions for Peter. Simply use that questions box that is inside the GoToWebinar control panel. I'm going to review those questions and pose those to Peter after his presentation. Peter, it's good to see you again, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, and that's quite an introduction. Today, we are going to do what we can do to help my colleagues in architecture and building up their game to be more responsive to the climate. I think that's particularly important to many of us who experienced this summer that we are just winding down. In Austin alone, we have about 2/3 of our year where we're dealing with heat. When I moved here 42 years ago for graduate school, yeah, I'm that old, you could go a summer without air conditioning. You couldn't begin to do that now. In 4 decades, the climate has changed that much. So let's jump into some strategies, particularly for those of you who live and practice in areas where people have to air condition a lot. Interestingly, that represents a much greater percentage of North America than it used to. As a matter of fact, I believe air conditioning dominated climates are where a large majority of our homes are being built now compared to heating dominated climates. And we were on a trip overseas this year, and I found this particular waiter at this restaurant in Oslo, Norway, wearing a sweatshirt that I thought really summed it up. We have to change. We have to get our act together because there is no planet B. I want to give you an idea where we come from, because although you read my bio, Mike, and that was very helpful, the reality of where we are coming from with this talk is important for you, because we're not looking at it from just the perspective of building science consultants or energy raters or architects or designers. I will start off by saying that I met my partner while we were both older students at the University of Texas in the 1980s, where I was getting my master's in architecture, concentrating on energy studies, a pretty new field at the time. We were helping develop the first computer-based energy analysis program for buildings in America, and that really taught us a lot and gave us a lot of insight. We're very comfortable with new construction and remodeling, interior design, and doing building science consulting for our colleagues in building and architecture. What this means, though, is we're very comfortable with the realities of building and building maintenance and building ownership. We've been buying property, designing buildings, building buildings, maintaining and owning buildings for over 4 decades. So that gives you where my perspective comes from. And I'm going to start off by saying, as much as I loved going to school for building science and for energy modeling, thoughtful project programming and smart design trump building science and analytics, period. You can do all the building science you want. You can do all the analytics you want. But if the design wasn't programmed and designed to respond to its climatic setting, it will never be better than maybe a B minus. So I just took a sketch out of my partner's sketchbook here to show you a fraternity house we are designing here in Austin. You will note this is Austin. Look at the large shading pavilion we've got there for all of the rooms. That's just one hint. So my point for my design colleagues out there is I respect you tremendously. I love the work good designers do, but you need to combine that design work with your knowledge of the climate to design projects that respond to the climate. Peter Pfeiffer architecture is called what it is because I love that right brain stuff and left brain stuff, the analytics, the building science, plus the programming and design. So today we're going to be talking about really what should come first, which is to program and build smarter homes that are healthier and energy efficient and more resilient by design. And then we'll get into some building science stuff. Here's an interesting point that is also coming to roost now that we are in the midst of hurricane season. I went to re-up my insurance on my house and my buildings, and I was surprised at how much higher home insurance and commercial building insurance is. For a very respected insurance company's executive, he said, look, the intensity and the frequency of storms are now causing billions in unforeseen damage. It's another reason why we want to design for the climate. We have to recognize how much money we can save our clients in insurance premiums if we also design for the climate. Some of you may have seen that picture from Lahaina, Hawaii, where there was that one house standing amongst all of the carnage and rubble. It had some very smart things. It had a metal roof. It had a fire resistant exterior. It had spray foam insulation that quadrupled its wind resistance, a special type of spray foam insulation, the closed cell. and its plantings were done such that they were kept a good distance away from the buildings. These aren't rocket science strategies. These are simple strategies that made all the difference in the world in that project. Where did green building come from is always interesting to talk about, and some of you have heard me speak before may find this repetitive, but it's worth going back to its roots, which was the early 1980s, where the city of Austin was looking for a way to produce more power to satisfy its growing demand for electricity. It's a lesson in thinking outside the box. The power company planners were talking about the projected population growth and therefore how many megawatts of electricity we will need. But what some of us from that graduate program who were in attendance at that meeting challenged them about was, what are the assumptions based on your statement? How much energy do you expect the typical resident to use going forward? What times of the day are we going to be needing this? What's the peak demand versus the baseload demand? And when we looked at that, what we found out was that energy consumption could be altered a lot through just some basic things like how we cook, what appliances we use, what type of lighting we use, and what type of air conditioning we use, because we realized the majority of our power needs were associated with only about 100 hours a year, which is when people come home to make dinners in the summer nights. They turn on their appliances, they turn up their air conditioning, and they turn on their lights. So by zooming in on programs that gave them rebates for those three things, we were able to avoid building a new power plant for almost 2 decades. We nicknamed it the conservation power plant. And that's what started what we named the Energy Star program. It was called Austin Energy Star because it was named after the capital of the Lone Star Republic. It was very simple, but it made the point that managing demand of electricity is more important than trying to create new sources of electricity. And that translates to what I'm going to be talking to you about today. Managing the demand of power is a lot more effective and in the longer term, a lot better than putting solar panels on the roof and making your own electricity, no matter how inexpensive. Fast forwarding a little bit, in the early 1990s, we took this idea of managing demand and applied it to water conservation and also the waste stream that was filling up our landfills. We realized our landfills were being filled up, about 50% of the trash was coming from the building industry. So we wanted to invite the building industry into the picture, and that's why we named the program now Green Building. We changed it from Energy Star and called it Green Building because we wanted the building industry to come into the picture. And that's how green building started in the English-speaking world. The first National Green Building Conferences were hosted here in Austin by this little group of us called the Resource Management Commission, before it got bought up by the National Association of Home Builders and then later by the US Green Building Council. But it's important to find out or to think about the background of green building. It was about managing demand, first and foremost. So to me, it really boils down meaning green building, to a smaller carbon footprint. How do we encourage folks to live with a smaller carbon footprint? We reduce the consumption on things, water, energy, materials. We look to improve your indoor air quality so you have better health. And we reduce environmental impact by choosing smartly where we're going to build or remodel. So those three things form the foundation of the green building movement. As it moved forward, I realized we have to keep it simple, because if we get into complicated things, you got to understand complicated things, gizmos, etc., they break. Solar systems, for example, will not last forever. My inverter on my home system went out 2 years after the warranty was up. So my payback went from being 13 years to more like 21 years. Keep in mind that it would have been better just to save energy in the first place by design than to try to create energy. So we want to first and foremost rely on thoughtful climate-sensitive programming. What decisions can we help our clients make that will make it so they can live better while living with a smaller carbon footprint? They're not really complicated, folks. They're some very basic things. And then I also want to advocate the idea of building the architect and builder team early on. When we build the team early on, there's a great synthesis that can occur that will make building effective and less expensive. I think the green building movement is failing a bit in its mission, and I know that's a strong statement, but I think a lot of it goes to the fact that while LEED and the idea of energy efficiency programs like Passive House USA, LEED, and others are wonderful, and they've really brought this whole concept of living with a smaller carbon footprint to the public's conscious, you almost get too complicated in your approach. Things, I think it also gives too many of our colleagues cover that they can do a so-so design when it comes to climate responsiveness. But if they have a geothermal heat pump, if they have an energy recovery ventilation system or solar panels on the roof, that they can get cover, so to speak, and say, well, it's a very green project. No, green building is not about green materials. It is not about green systems as much as it's about green programming and design. And you always have to ask yourself what you're trying to accomplish in the first place. For example, why do we want to do a green roof? If the answer is because we want our building to be cooler, well, there are a lot more effective ways of doing that with a shading umbrella roof, and we'll talk about that. Because we have to be careful. A green roof in Austin, Texas would be a very tough thing to keep alive during these past 4 months without putting a lot of water on the roof, and water is becoming more and more dear around the country. So I'm not saying vegetated roofs are bad. I'm saying just make sure the strategies you choose make sense for your location and your climate. Another point is that most of you listening to us today, are in a very, very important position when it comes to society. Our clients put trust in us to guide them through the most expensive endeavor of their lives. So it's incumbent upon you to understand things objectively and give them objective guidance. We sometimes don't realize how important that is, but think about it. The most expensive endeavor of most people's lives is building their home. The advice you give them affects that. And it starts off with this project programming, and then we get into the design decisions, then the building science decisions. But while building science is important, especially when it comes to the long-term costs of owning and maintaining a home, it's the decisions we're going to make early in the game that are going to affect things even more. Here's a small but obvious example. Here's 2 homes in Austin, Texas. One is painted white, one is painted black. Look at the difference in the wall temperatures of those 2 homes at the very same time of the day. 101 degrees versus 131 degrees. So that decision to go with a dark color doubled the amount of insulation needed in those walls to keep the living quarters on the other side of those walls as comfortable. Just that one decision about this nifty looking dark color and the effect it will have on the client's comfort, their energy consumption, and the carbon footprint of these homes, much less the carbon that goes up into the atmosphere. We can guide our clients better than this. Here's another example with the roof. One of them's got a dark roof, the other one's got a light colored roof. Look at the difference in temperatures of those 2 roofs. So it doesn't only affect those things that I just mentioned, but it also affects this thing called the suburban or the urban heat island effect. If you have a neighborhood of dark houses and dark roofs, it's going to be at least 3 and as much as 5 degrees warmer than a neighborhood in an area like ours with light colored roofs and light colored exteriors. When I went to graduate school, I was enamored with this professor who convinced me to come here. I was looking at some wonderful schools like MIT and Berkeley, but the University of Texas had a physicist on the School of Architecture staff who was the first that I knew of to develop an energy analysis program to help builders and architects understand how their buildings are really using energy. And he taught us to use computer-based analysis and metrics so that we could do this analysis, but more importantly, so that we could develop an intuitive understanding of how to design. for the environment. He said, think about what enhances your personal comfort, then design the building with that in mind. Here's a good example. In Austin, it's, as I said earlier in the talk, we air condition 50 to 75% of the days of the year. So is insulation that's going to keep you warm going to be of great benefit? Probably not. Getting out of the sun and standing in the shade will. So here, radiation control is so much more important than the R value of the walls and even the roof system. There's just one good example of using intuition to make smart design decisions. Sadly, by the way, while I'm on the topic, a lot of the store-bought energy analysis programs, including the HERS ratings, I don't believe take radiation into effect enough. We have to look at the colors of the exterior and the radiant heat gain, and we have to look at whether or not the windows are truly shaded, not just at the shading coefficient of the glass, but whether the windows are truly shaded. Let me give you an example, a very down-to-earth example. You can wear a broad-brimmed hat and keep the sun off your face and off your eyes, and you can see very comfortably. Or you can put lots of sunscreen on and wear sunglasses. The latter will help you see better, the sunglasses, and the sunscreen will help you last a little bit longer in the sun, but neither of those are as effective of just shading your face in the first place. There is a good example you can apply to your homes. So taking some of this other intuition and applying it to things, there are some popular design strategies many of us, including my colleagues, are using, which is this floor-to-ceiling glass. Lots of glass in our homes, whether you be in Minneapolis or whether you be in Austin, there's a price you pay because you can't counteract the poor energy performance of glass by doing super insulated walls. This is a good example. You could have 100 square feet of R38 insulated concrete form walls and 100 square feet of R6 glazing. You would think the average R value of that assembly would be R22, but it's not. It's only about R8 because heat will travel through the path of least resistance. Most of the home's heat will go through the glass and not bother trying to go through the insulated walls to the outside. And in the summertime, a tremendous amount of heat will come in through the glass. It doesn't matter how well insulated the walls are if the glass is unshaded. So there is an example of, while it may be popular to do floor-to-ceiling glass and a lot of it, you have to be careful. Here's another example. That bottom third or a quarter of the glass that's down near the floor that you're not looking out of is contributing to 75% of the solar radiation gain in the building. We've done energy analysis of flat roofed houses with floor-to-ceiling glass. Sadly, there is no way you can make them perform any better than maybe a C+ compared to a house with broad overhangs and a gabled roof where you had an attic. So these are neat design decisions, but be aware they're costing us in society money and the carbon footprint. This is a beach house in South Jersey. I loved it. It was very contemporary looking, but what's wrong with the picture? Those windows are unshaded and they're facing into the afternoon sun. That device up in the upper right-hand corner isn't really shading that glass. This house is probably consuming 2 or 3 times the air conditioning it needed to if those windows were just shaded. And then we have to ask ourselves, without having the overhangs to protect that siding and those windows, how long will it be before this house needs expensive maintenance? So, as my mother used to say, if everyone else was jumping off the Empire State Building, would that mean it would be okay for you to do it? And I'm going to translate that to say, just because a lot of our colleagues are doing homes that don't respond to the elements doesn't mean you should be doing it. You can do good looking stuff that responds to the elements and to the climate. Here's a simple example. Those awnings on the windows or on the screens in the windows on the right cut the air conditioning in that old building by 30 to 40%. And they make it brighter inside because you don't have to close the blinds to be comfortable in the house. So you don't have to turn on the lights. So the overhangs actually reflect light, or the awnings reflect light into the house and make it a more pleasant environment to see and greatly reduce the energy consumption, the carbon footprint of these buildings. The roof is another example of that. A living roof is wonderful for reducing the amount of radiation that penetrates the roof and heats up the home. But maybe we can do it more efficiently, and this is where we develop the idea of a shading umbrella roof. This is not an example of what you want to do. Here you've got a dark colored roof that's applied directly to the roof deck. So that roofing material, this metal roofing material, gets very hot and very efficiently transmits its heat to the roof decking and the rafters and the home below. What's a simple change we can do is lifting the roof off of the roof deck so there's an airspace underneath it. Doing a light colored roof, this is Galvalume. The underside of Galvalume, by the way, has a fantastic radiant barrier effect. It thwarts about 80% of the solar heat that's heating it up. So here we have a metal roof that's going to last much longer, and it's going to keep this house significantly cooler than this one. Just a simple installation technique and a design decision not to do a dark colored roof makes a huge difference. This is my home. I developed this roof system about 23 years ago when I was designing it. We were gone in Norway for a few weeks this summer. Our attics got no hotter than 92 degrees with the air conditioning off. Compare that to a typical home in Austin where the attic temperature would get to north of 140 degrees. It really makes a difference to have a shading umbrella roof. So let me pull some of these things together for a project we submitted recently for some design awards. We call it Skyview Independent because it's a beautiful home that was designed for a family to pass on to their kids and their grandkids as a family gathering place. It's a relatively good size home, but its carbon footprint is wonderfully small. All of its electricity is generated on site by the solar system, but we were able to do that with a modest solar system because we shaded the windows and had this shading umbrella roof and did the design to respond so well to the climate. Also, all of its water needs are handled with the rainwater collection system. So first and foremost, we want to make sure the building's oriented not only to the wonderful views, but to take advantage of the prevailing breezes and to shun itself from the hot afternoon sun. You'll notice on the left-hand side, that's a garage building that's taking most of the solar heat and some utility rooms on the left. We don't have the main living areas facing into the afternoon sun. The house is only about one room deep, so it could really take advantage of natural daylighting, shaded daylighting, reflected daylighting, no direct solar heat gain anywhere in this house. On the second floor, which is where the grandkids and the kids would be, well, it's a whole separate air conditioning zone that can be just turned off in the summertime if the kids aren't there, or turned off in the wintertime when they're not there. You don't have to turn up the thermostat, just turn it off. It doesn't, the house won't melt and the house won't freeze. But the point is, we really separated the visitors areas from the main living area of mom and dad, so that we weren't air conditioning and heating a part of the house only for, what, 5% visits a year. When we went out to the site, we experienced where the breezes were coming from. We did some studies ahead of time. A simple way of finding out where your prevailing breezes are coming from is look at the nearest airstrip. Whichever way the airstrip, the runway is facing, tells you where the prevailing winds and prevailing breezes are coming from. So take advantage of that when you're designing. Look at the vegetation, get to know the soil, because the vegetation and the soil will be important for you to take into consideration when coming up with a design. But you have to go to the site, you have to learn it. The site will tell you all sorts of things. So this design is luxurious, it promotes healthier living, it's resilient in the aftermath of natural disasters for one big reason in our area. You can live in this house without air conditioning. It's designed to be comfortable without air conditioning. Imagine how many homes you cannot say that for nowadays. But because the windows are shaded, it's not collecting a lot of heat. Same with the roof. And yet the windows are designed to enhance natural ventilation. The house will get up to about 82 degrees on a 102 degree day without air conditioning. That's survivable. That's something you could live in after a hurricane shuts down the local power plants for a few weeks. So resilience takes many different approaches. A resilience approach here is to keep the house cool and comfortable after a hurricane. It's not moving right now, Vanessa. Can you give me an example? All right, let's try it again. No. Okay. I addressed this earlier, but when we're doing homes without roof overhangs and without awnings, it's sort of like those two unfortunate houses on the left. They've got to have a fantastic amount of SPF. They've got to have something to do to make them cool that's synthetic, and that's probably going to wear out, sort of like suntan lotion. Whereas the house on the right, because of the fact it's shaded and the elements aren't hitting the walls and the roof, will be cool and comfortable and last a lot longer. Those are design decisions, and design decisions get reacted to. Here was a multi-million-dollar home in my neighborhood that had some dark color, so it collected heat, and no shading of the glass. Eventually, the occupants solved the problem by putting that aluminum foil in their bedroom windows. I don't think that's appropriate to have to do that to a $2 million home, do you? So you have to listen to your clients and listen to the climate and design accordingly. The home we did here, the example project, Skyview Independent, the whole form of the design came about by responding to the climate. The roof angles up to take in the nice north reflected light, and it comes down closer to the windows on the left-hand side or the south side to shade the windows. We minimize east-facing glass that's not shaded, and we have almost no west-facing glass. And what makes it sort of nice on top of all of that is because we had such a large roof area facing south, it was a great place to mount an ample amount of solar panels. But the point is, by design, the home is making itself more comfortable and less consumptive of energy. We use that large roof also to collect all the water it needs for the rainwater collection system. But primarily, the lighting comes into the house is reflected light, reflected northern and southern light. Really avoid direct solar heat gain and direct light coming in from the sun. Even if you're living in Indiana in the summertime, it's going to be glare and problematic. Reflected light is your friend. I'm not going to bother trying to go through all of the strategies we used here. Let's just move on, but I wanted to show you a view of the north face or the back of this house. And here we have the west face in the lower left-hand corner. Notice how few windows are facing west, and you'll notice the awnings directly above the two bigger ones. We let things like the garage and the laundry room and the back entry take the bear the brunt of the solar heat. By the way, you'll also notice we use light colored building materials. It's a darker colored siding than it really appears in this photograph because it's in the shade. It's actually a light gray siding and very light colored stone. Because we're in an air conditioned dominated climate, dark red brick or dark stone would not be appropriate here. So there's an example of another design decision that will make this house more resilient and more comfortable. And then you see the two cisterns, one of them on the left there, each one of them is 25,000 gallons, and that provides all the water we need to run this house. Plus, it provides a firefighting vessel, which greatly reduced the homeowner's insurance premiums because they have the stored water to fight a fire, even though they're at a very remote location. But notice the awnings above the windows in that lower right-hand slide. We do sun angle calculations to tell us how much horizontal shading we need to protect those vertical windows. And then here's another example of interior design decisions that can make your life easier. Look at the light colored countertops. The light colored reflecting surfaces, countertops, floors, greatly reduce the amount of lighting you need because lighting is a function of bouncing off of a horizontal surface and coming up to your eyeballs so you can read what it is, look at what it is you're doing. You can dice a tomato on that countertop using about 1/3 as much light than if it were a dark countertop because it's easier for you to see what you're doing because it's a light colored countertop. Also notice that the light fixtures are hanging down right above the work area. We're not trying to light the work area with recessed cans 10 feet up in the air. Lighting falls off as a square of its distance from the task. I know that's a nerdy statement, but follow me here. A light fixture that is 1 foot above the countertop will put out a certain amount of light that will reflect up to your eyes. If you move that light fixture 3 feet above the countertop, it will need to put out 9 times this many lumens of light for you to get the same beneficial effect. That's what I mean, that lighting falls off as a square of its distance to the task. So bring the lighting down close to the task. Sure, you want to use LED lighting and energy efficient lighting, but the placement of the lighting and the reflective surfaces are more important. And we always try to help our clients enjoy the outdoors luxuriously. This is a screened-in porch. They spend a tremendous amount of their time, particularly in the fall, spring, and winter here in Austin out there. But you can even have wonderful times out there in the summer mornings. We really want to help our clients see that you can enjoy life in these air-conditioned dominated climates without having to have air conditioning. And then maybe as a final image of this house, we use the stair tower to do 2 things. These stairs come off the kitchen. You can't see in this slide, but it's over on the left hand. It's over in the back wall of this house. So we're bringing a lot of natural reflected light down into the kitchen area, which is where you need the most amount of light in a house, by the way, is the kitchen. But we're also using the stairs and the windows that can open at the top of them as a thermal siphon to let the hot air rise up and get out of the house. Where does the hot air mostly come from? Well, the kitchen. So we're using the stair tower in conjunction with the kitchen to bring natural lighting in and to help vent the house out well during the times of the year we are not air conditioning. To say nothing of the fact that it makes for a nice looking stairway. So building science and technology can't overcome the lack of climate responsive design. For those of you who are listening who are HERS raters and into building science, I respect what you do. But first and foremost, we have to do smart programming and good design. With climate change, shade is incredibly important. So you architects and building designers get to learn how to do sun angle analysis. Our climate's getting hotter, not cooler. We have to think about this much more so than we used to. So use the roof to shade the house as well as to keep water out. And some other points, swimming pools use an amazing amount of electricity. Make sure your clients understand that if they say they want a swimming pool, that many swimming pools use as much electricity as the entire home. So we really want to think about the way the plumbing's done, the energy efficiency of the pump system, the energy efficiency of the cleaning system. Get to understand them because there are some very efficient cleaning systems and some very energy consumptive cleaning systems, like the in-floor cleaning systems for swimming pools might sound nifty, but they use 80 to 100 times the amount of electricity to clean the pool compared to a low voltage electric cleaning robot. Just some examples. And also, I love spray polyurethane insulation, but there is a global warming effect associated with it. So get to know the products that are better, that have a lower global warming effect. There are some now that Owens Corning is pushing that I do believe in. But the point is, the indoor air quality associated with spray polyurethane foam is wonderful because it keeps the humidity out of a home and it really does help reduce air infiltration. But the better foams don't off-gas and have a much lower global warming potential. So modern style homes, which I know are popular right now, can be very climate responsive, but you've got to respond to the sun. You can't ignore it. Other countries are doing it. Excuse the blurriness of the slide, but I was in Oslo, Norway, and I noticed, look, there's exterior shading devices on this condominium complex. And I say exterior shading devices because you want to stop the radiation before it comes into the building. Curtains don't do nearly as good a job as exterior shading devices. you can figure out ways of incorporating handsome exterior shading devices in your homes. And my challenge will be this. Here is the cover of Residential Design magazine last month. It's a fantastically creative approach to doing an addition here in Austin. I love it. It's nifty. It's great. It's something that's delightful. But remember, we air condition here and shun radiation for about 2/3 of the year as a function of climate change. So could this project still have made the magazine cover if those windows were shaded and if the exterior color was thought about from the perspective that we talked about in this talk? Now, my answer to that is yes, it still could have won design awards and be climate responsive. And that's the change we have to accept. So if you get nothing else out of this talk today, please make sure that's the point. You can do fantastic designs and be climate responsive. Last but not least, I love this statement by Kurt Vonnegut. Will go down in history as the first society that wouldn't save itself because it wasn't cost effective. Thank you very much. If any of you are interested in hearing more of our talks, go to YouTube. We did a wonderful one with Matt Reisinger not too long ago, how to design a better home. We've also done some great talks through the International Builder Show. The one in 2023 is available. I think you can go to thebuildershow.com or YouTube and put in our name, or go to the buildshownetwork.com and see some of our talks. Thank you very much for listening, and I've got 15 minutes I left for questions, so go ahead and ask away. Let's talk.
All right,
Mike?
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. And yes, please send in your questions that and I'll ask on your behalf. And we have had a couple questions come in already, and I've got a couple of my own, Peter.
Okay.
I wanted to talk to you for a minute about the overhangs, right? So I think it was in the 70s we saw kind of some of those 2-foot overhangs that would help with some of that solar shading. Why don't we see more of those?
If you had the answer to that, I would give you $100, Mike. I think what happened is in the 70s, there was a lot of attention paid to passive solar design and designing with the climate. I know President Carter really influenced me when I was a young guy. I was in high school and then in college when he told us, look, we can deal with the Saudi or the Middle Eastern oil crisis by just reducing our demand for energy. Wear a sweater in the wintertime, turn the thermostat down, shade your windows in the summertime. He was the one who created the building energy performance standards that a lot of us who were going through architecture school at that time took seriously. I think what happened was that movement faded. There was a lot of negativity associated with the early solar movement with solar panels that broke and didn't last. President Reagan ceremoniously took President Carter's solar panels off the White House when he came into office. I think architecture schools stopped teaching how to design to respond to the climate. I think technology became the love child more than common sense design. And I still think that's the case. When we interview students coming out of architecture school now, I am surprised to learn how much their approach to green building is so much more about technology than it is smart programming and design. So you maybe can answer it for me, Mike. Somewhere along the line, our schools of architecture stopped emphasizing sensible, climate-sensitive design. And I think we've got an awful lot of our colleagues in architecture who just don't do it, yet it's very simple to do. And I hope you learned some of that in this talk today. It's not complicated stuff, but you do have to learn how to do sun angle analysis.
Yeah. And I mean, I see it a lot. I mean, I've got homes that are being built just out this window, and you know, the edge of the roof is right near. It's amazing to me. But I did want to flip that question around for a minute.
Wait a minute, where are you located, Mike, so I understand?
I'm in the St. Louis area.
Okay, great. Middle of the country.
right in the middle of the U.S. But let's flip that around for a second. Do those overhangs make sense in either tornado or hurricane-prone areas where they could, contribute to uplift and potentially ripping the roof off?
Well, you have to design it accordingly. We've designed homes with broad overhangs and that elevated metal roof in the Houston area that have gone through 2 or 3 hurricanes and been fine. You have to use hurricane straps for the raft to attach the rafters to the wall plate, and I think you're fine.
Okay.
There's all sorts of interesting studies, but one of them NAHB did about the benefit of broad overhangs and awnings. They did a study that talked about how long you can expect building materials to last. And they talked about granite countertops and versus Formica countertops. But when they got to things like windows and doors, they had to break it down into 2 categories. Windows and doors that are under at least a 3-foot awning versus windows and doors that have no protection. The windows and doors that have no protection are expected to last about 15 to 20 years. Windows and doors underneath a decent awning or overhang are going to last at least a century. So when you keep the elements, the water, the sun, and other things like that off of the windows and doors, they last longer. There's a reason why you don't see a lot of the original mid-century modern homes anymore, because they didn't last. They violated that very basic principle that a building has to protect one from the elements. So houses with at least 2-foot overhangs are going to comprise only about 8% of the building science failures. Or put another way, houses and buildings with almost no overhangs are a boon for the building science consultants and those coming in later to fix things like leaks in the house or problems with the windows and doors. So I know it's a popular look, but it's not a very well thought out look.
Gotcha. Awesome. I wanted to get to the topic that my friend Vicky brought it up, Charlene as well. They basically want to know, how do these principles apply to cold climates? Would you then kind of flip this out and design with some of the opposites, like darker colors or windows facing south? Or what would you do when you take this like Texas design, but you throw it up into New York?
Well, we do work in New York. We're doing a house in New Jersey right now, and most everything I talked about today will fully apply to there. But obviously, you want to size your overhangs accordingly so you can collect solar heat in the wintertime and shade the windows in the summertime. That's a very basic foundational principle of passive solar design. Whether or not dark roofs make sense to do up north in New Jersey or New York or in Montana, the answer is no. We're not going to be warming up our house by doing a dark roof or darker colors. That's going to help us in any significant manner in the wintertime. We did a home in the mountains of Montana not too many years ago, and that floating ventilated roof worked wonderfully there because it helped stop snow melt and ice dams. So a lot of these strategies from a building science point of view can apply and benefit you in the northern climates. But this is a 45-minute presentation, Mike. I obviously couldn't get into everything I've learned over 40 some odd years about designing passive solar with a passive solar approach in everywhere in the world. But the ideas, the foundational ideas are still there. Do your sun angle analysis to bring in solar heat. Protect the building from the elements by having broad overhangs and awnings. Think about the effects of the color. Dark color paint, by the way, doesn't last as long as light colored paint. So even if you are building in Minnesota, that's still important to not be repainting your house every 7 years versus every 20 years. The color of the paint will determine how long the paint lasts. Your reader or your audience member is welcome to contact us. I'll gladly spend some time with them on the phone, and we offer consultation services to other architects and builders around the country.
Very good. And on the topic of the coloring, Our friend Howard from Hawaii chimed in and sent me a note, and he said that they had measured a dark roof in Honolulu, and it had registered a temperature of 178 Fahrenheit. But then
Wow.
they coated it white, and the temperature dropped to 105.
Well, there's a good example. But here's something to now add to that. How long will it stay bright and white? A lot of these strategies we've talked about where we think about the albedo effect on the roof color do diminish over time, which is why I really want to point out the benefit of that shading umbrella roof we designed, because the real benefit is not so much that exterior color. I don't know if you can see this. I just went back to the slide. It's the color and the surface underneath this roof that's elevated above the roof deck that is acting as a true radiant barrier, and that will never get affected by the elements. So that was the lesson I learned over the years, is while a light colored roof is beneficial, a radiant barrier that's well protected from the elements is going to be the long-term play.
Okay. Switching gears a little bit here, Peter, Deborah wanted to know, what energy modeling software do you like?
Well, that's a good question. My former employer took a lot of what we were developing in graduate school back in the early 1980s and developed a program called AutoMac. His name is Mac Holder, L.M. Holder III in Austin, Texas. He is the one who actually owns the license to the program. He's a small-time provider. He's an architect, but is by far the most accurate and insightful energy modeling program of any of them out there. So I would contact L.M. Holder III in Austin, Texas, and ask about buying his computer energy analysis program. It's fantastic, and it really gave all of us, my staff and me included, a wonderful intuitive understanding of what makes a difference. Because the program also allows you to factor in how the home or the building is used. Here's an example. If you're a very slender, healthy couple and you're comfortable air conditioning your house to 78 degrees, a more efficient air conditioning system will not have as great a beneficial effect for you as it would for a couple that needs to run the house at 72 degrees. So it actually factors in the way you use the house and then tells you which strategies make the most sense. A family with lots of children doing lots of loads of laundry every week and lots of loads in the dishwasher every week is going to get a lot more benefit out of a very efficient hot water heating system than an empty nester couple building their home. So there is an example of, well, okay, maybe a tankless water heater makes sense in the one case, but in the other case, it'll probably be more like a 20 to 30 year payback. That's some of the stuff that we can do with this energy program. But if you also think about that, Mike, it's all common sense. You can apply common sense and get to a lot of these answers yourself. Just think about the effects of the way a home is used and what machines are being run to make it comfortable or to solve that need. And that will tell you how important it is, for example, to place hot water heating efficiency, or do we want to look at how much energy that pool is using? I will tell you, in many parts of the country, from maybe St. Louis south, in order of energy consumption, it's the custom swimming pool is the most consumptive thing. Air conditioning is then the second most consumptive thing. Lighting is the third most consumptive thing, and then heating and water heating, which is very different than what you probably would read typically. But if you're doing custom homes for a living, as opposed to production builder homes, you will find that that's really the order of magnitude you want to pay attention to. Swimming pools, air conditioning, and lighting are the biggies that you want to deal with.
So you're finding that the energy consumption for lighting exceeds the water heating, even with the switch to LED lights?
In many cases, for a larger custom home, for a smaller family, yes. Think about it. You got a 3,500, 4,500 square foot home, lots of lighting. Lighting puts out heat, even LED lighting puts out heat that affects your air conditioning load. On the other hand, water heating has changed a lot because not only are water heaters more efficient, but appliances that use hot water are much, much more efficient, and so are the fixtures. We probably aren't using a shower head that's using 7 gallons of water a minute. We're probably using one that's 2 or 3, or maybe at the most 5 gallons a minute. So that 10-minute shower is using a third as much or half as much hot water as a 10-minute shower 20 years ago would use. Same with your washing machines and your dishwashers. We use much less hot water than we used to because of that. And therefore, an energy efficient hot water heater, while I still think it's great to do, is going to have a much further out payback. In most cases, we found that payback for something like a heat pump water heater or a tankless water heater is further out than you would imagine. At least 15 years, in many cases 20, 25 years. I know that sounds a little bit strange, but do the analysis and you'll see.
Gotcha. Our friend Hap, he sent in a message. He said, "Hey, did you apply for the challenge, the Texas Hill Country?"
I'm sorry, say that again, Mike. You were cutting out.
That's okay. Did you apply for the Living Building Challenge for the Texas that you showed us?
Did I apply for the Green Building Challenge for that Texas Hill Country home that we showed you? I don't think so. Did we, Vanessa? I don't think so. But hello, Hap. Maybe you should give me a call or email me after this. Let's talk. Before I forget, Mike, your caller or your audience member from Hawaii, I've gone there twice to give talks once in the past to give a talk at the university. I would love to be invited to come back there again, because many of these strategies were considered very novel when I gave that talk at the University of Hawaii about 15 years ago. Love to come back.
Yeah, I'll take an invite too.
Okay.
Question for you real quick, and then this is the final call for questions to our audience. What is your perspective on fireplaces?
Well, fireplaces are interesting. God, it's a large subject. I'll just throw out some thoughts. When it comes to Brazilians, what we learned during what was called Snowmageddon here 2 years ago is that, thank God, I had a wood-burning fireplace in my house, or else we would not have been able to stay in it. We have a very energy-efficient home that's got a very tight envelope, and we were able to keep it at a survivable temperature by burning wood in the fireplace. Without it, we would have had to move out. So that's an interesting point. But fireplaces, you have to be very careful about the infiltration they end up promoting into the home. Fireplaces on exterior walls are particularly problematic because you can't wrap the chimney or the firebox very well with an infiltration barrier. So fireplaces do make for a less tight house, and you really do want a tight house to reduce energy consumption and also to improve indoor air quality. And that latter statement, I know, would require a whole nother subchapter, but nonetheless, fireplaces can be problematic. You always want to try to do them on an interior wall, not an exterior wall. You want to make sure your client seals off the flue during the time of the year when they're not using it with a chimney pillow. It's an inflatable pillow that you force up into the flue, because otherwise they're a bad source of infiltration of air that you don't want mixing with your house. They can also bring bad air into the house after a fire if you've got an air conditioning system where the ducts leak a little bit, because when the ducts leak, or air conditioner or heating system, because when the ducts leak, it makes the house go into a vacuum. When a home goes into a vacuum, it draws air down the fireplace chimney, and you don't want that. So maybe the short answer is you got to be really careful with the way you deal with fireplaces, and there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I want to thank Peter for sharing his time and his insight with us today. Always good to have a sustainability superhero around. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on, Mike.
I also want to thank our audience for attending, asking great questions. It's good to see some friends in the list. And thank you once again also to our sponsors. So Mitsubishi Electric, Sonova, Schneider Electric, Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions, Jinko Solar, and LP Building Solutions for their sponsorships. Now, if you liked what you heard today, this is the kind of insight and knowledge that you can expect to get in the Housing 2.0 program. The Series 2 workshops actually start in about a month. They start on Thursday, October 19. For more information and to register for that, please go to www.greenbuildermedia.com/housing-2.0. Now, stay tuned to your inbox for information on our next webinar. In the meantime, enjoy those fall colors and cooler temperatures ahead. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care, everyone. So long.